I was a United States Army active engineer. I was stationed on Fort Riley, Kansas from 96 to 2000. I wanted to serve my country just like my father and my grandfather and my uncles, and so that was my reason for joining the military, was to serve my country, and that purpose only. I was raised with my grandmother. She was part of a group called the Navy Mothers, who supported Vietnam vets when they came back. My dad was a Vietnam vet when he came back. So I was raised by a Marine, that had served in Vietnam, a man that had PTSD and his struggles. It took me until later in my life to realize a lot of that stuff. So when he came back, he was a changed person. So I grew up seeing a lot of these things. So in the veteran community, when you have all these people that signed that dotted line that agreed to possibly not come back, that is the bravery that I love and the camaraderie that I love of the community, the veteran community, that they signed up for something that they knew they might not come back, something that, selfless. So as progressing through time, me growing up, I realized that, more and more as I get older, that our future is our past, and our younger generation of veterans need our help just as much as we did back then, and it just goes all along the line. So I want to continue to serve even though I'm not in the military anymore. So I want to do what I can to help those guys now that have gone in our wartime situations now. When they come back, I want to help them become normal again. I'm also the president and director of operations of Operation Combat Bike Saver, which is a nonprofit organization, 501c3, that helps in a way rehabilitate and help combat veterans and first responders come together and build and put together a project motorcycle. And they come in and it leaves their stress behind. They come in, they learn some things. They put together this motorcycle from scratch. It's something that's tarnished and forgotten about. And it's kind of, metaphorically speaking, there's a motorcycle that's forgotten about, and it's just sitting there. And it's been forgotten about and sitting in somebody's garage for their barn for 20 years. And then there's this combat veteran or a first responder or a police fireman that has PTSD and a troubling mind, And they come out to our shop and they work together on this motorcycle with all us brothers and sisters and friends and learning new things, welding and fabricating and resurrecting this motorcycle into something they never thought they could ever do. So once they get done with that creation, we give it to them and they get to keep it. And they're always welcome in our program. And it's just something, we've had several friends of ours in the past year commit suicide over their troubled mind. So if there's some way that we can open our arms and bring these guys in to help them, realize that there's more to life than negativity and the past. So if they can come in and actually, release some creativity and, have something physical to show for what's on their mind. And if they want to express it that way, I want to help them bring that out, teach them how to weld, teach them how to fabricate, and then they're always welcome with the program. They can come back and teach others. So if the program helped them, they're always welcome to help others with the program.
Basically joined the military at a young age, didn't want to go to college, wanted to become a cop, and that didn't happen. But didn't want to go to college, joined the military, got deployed when I was 19, went to Afghanistan, tough time over there, and basically came back here and tried helping out some other people. Like I helped Jim Chancellor with, I already gave him a couple names to some people, the veterans that need help, and one of them in particular that's tried to commit suicide a couple different times, and yeah, they're trying to get their life together, and he's trying to help them out really good. The biggest thing is I don't think people understand is only, I think it is like 11% of everyone that is deployed goes outside the wire. Like outside the base, fob into the danger zones and all that stuff. And I was out every day. And so, but the thing about that is a lot of people, even the people that stayed on base, still kind of, depending where you were at, got to see some sort of, because they were getting rocketed every day and stuff like that. And I mean, but other people that went outside the wire were actually in the shit, I don't know if I can say that or not, but but yeah, we're actually out in the shit, and that was the toughest time. the day it ended, oh, it was an exciting day. I got out of the military, and about 2 months later, I decided I wanted to be back in, and I joined the reserves. But yeah, that was a happy day for me, and I know a bunch of my buddies and all that. The first thing we did was go out and get drunk because we wanted to celebrate we were out. And then that was kind of the worst thing, like, all right, what am I going to do now? And that was where I got back into the reserves because I still wanted to be in it.
I enlisted in the Marine Corps back in August '93. I served my time. I did 16 and a half years. I was stationed at Camp Pendleton, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and other places. I was a hydraulic mechanic for the Hueys for support equipment. We supported the helicopters, and that was the best time of my life with the Marine Corps. The reason I enlisted in the Marine Corps, I think it was pride, because it's a family tradition to be in the military. My older brother was in the Air Force. My dad was in the Army. He was in Korea. My uncles were all in the different branches. So my oldest cousin was in the Marine Corps, and he was the only one. So I'm like, why not? I joined the Marine Corps because of the pride and the unit the Marine Corps is. In my experience, like I said, the Marine Corps, the first day of boot camp was it was a shocker because nobody told me how boot camp was going to be. So when I went to boot camp and getting yelled at, I wasn't used to being yelled at, pointing fingers in my face and, threatening me. I wasn't used to that. So it broke me down from a young kid into what I am today, a man who wants to serve his country, serve his veterans too. So unfortunately, like I said, I was injured in the Marine Corps. And at a time, if you're injured pretty severe, to get you out, you're out. I fought it to stay in, but unfortunately, if you're broke, the Marine Corps doesn't need you. Okay, not in a bad way, but it's you can't perform. But once again, nobody told me how it was gonna be getting out, and it felt that when I got injured, I felt it was my fault that I got injured. I felt like guilt that, okay, I did something wrong to the Marine Corps. Then they were taking everything away from me that I did for 16 and a half years. Because the Marine Corps I was married to the Marine Corps. I wasn't married yet. I was married to the Marine Corps, and that was my life. I would love to stay for 30 years. But coming out of the Marine Corps, everything was taken away from me. I felt everything was taken away from me, especially when I was in a couple of my friends who went back to Iraq and Afghanistan, and the stories I heard from them, and it felt that I let them down. It felt like a guilt trip. I'm like, I left everything behind. It was I didn't realize until my wife was telling me that I was getting depressed. I didn't realize it until my family members were calling me, telling me, "Once you come out," it was a different lifestyle for me when I was coming out of the Marine Corps. We started a business and everything, my wife and I. My business took a toll. Because my mindset where I was at, I wasn't there really to work with civilian people, and civilian people were not ready for my attitude, my way of the Marine Corps life. My business took a hit, took a toll, and there was to a point that I got married. A year and a half later, I have a son. Everything was moving so fast for me, couldn't adapt, and at the last minute, like I said, it wasn't for the DAV or the VFW there. I would not be here today.
Originally, I was going to go into the Navy for 4 years, and I thought about it, and I thought, man, that's a long time. So I went to the Navy and said, could I change that? Very naive. And they said no. But the Marine Corps recruiter was standing in the doorway, and he just said, hey, come here. If I can get you in the Marine Corps for 3, would you take it? I said, okay. When I went to Vietnam, I have 6 traumatic events. The thing about combat is that you have what I call normal combat and abnormal combat. and I've experienced both. The normal combat that you train for, the only thing you don't know is how you're going to react when you first experience it. But you quickly learn. And then the abnormal combat, that's really what messes you up. One of the worst things that you can ever witness is what I call the silent scream. When guys are what's going on out there, and they're screaming, but there's no sound coming out of them. And you have to try to reboot them, in a sense, by slapping them, bringing them back. And I did that to one guy, and he told me, he goes, thanks. He goes, thank you for that. Because his mind was just burning up. So I know what can happen out there. And the thing that happened to me afterwards was I just had the thought in my head saying, God, I hope that never happens to me. And from that point on, I was stuttering. I started stuttering. And we were brought back to the rear, debriefed what happened out there. In the military, you can get away with just one-word answers. No, yes, And we were back for maybe 3 or 4 days. And then we were getting ready to go back out. That was the most terrifying time for me. All the stuff that I'd seen, everything that I witnessed, didn't even come close to the terror that I felt, because I kept on thinking, am I going to be all right? Will I be able to do my job? So when we got out there, landed, firefight, I got on my radio, smooth as silk. And I'm thinking, I'm smiling, and I feel good, explosions, bullets. And a guy that was close by to me goes, what the hell are you smiling about? I go, nothing. So afterwards, after the firefight, I thought, okay, I'm back. No. Started stuttering again. And I remained, I stuttered till I came home. I still had time in, so it was like 9 months after coming back home that I felt a little bit easier about talking. But when I came home, I couldn't talk to my parents. I didn't want them to know.
Home was in Hammond, Indiana. My mom and dad and little sister met me at the airport. Small sign, welcome home, because we didn't go in units for the most part. A few did, but for the most part of it is individual. So you came home as an individual. Folded up my uniform, put it on the back shelf, and went to work. Didn't think a lot about it. And almost 20-some years later, they had a welcome home in Chicago. I went to work. I worked downtown in Chicago. I took my fatigue jacket with me that day, and everybody in the office said, what's that? No one knew that I had ever been to Vietnam. No one that I worked with, no one. And I told some of the folks what that was, and they said, whoa, why do you have it today? Well, there's a welcome home parade today. They said, you better get out of here and go to that parade. I had no plans to do anything other than watch the parade. And a unit went by from Indiana. And I said, do you mind if I walk with you? And I was at the very beginning of the parade. They said, hop in. And it was the most spectacular day I've ever had on this earth. And I can only tell you that we left the side streets by Navy Pier, not many people there. Walked down Upper Wacker Drive, a few people, and turned down LaSalle Street. And I don't know how many people were there, but hundreds of thousands of people. And it was unbelievable. And it truly was a welcome home. And until that day, I never felt anything. It was numbing. And that day, I felt that I was home. And the most amazing thing happened as we made the final turn to go towards Grant Park. An elderly gentleman was walking along the sidewalk, and he had his World War II uniform on. And he looked at myself and a couple of other guys who were walking together, and he said, and the streets had narrowed so much now that where we were 5 or 6 or 8 wide, it was down to 2 or 3 wide because of the crush of people. And he said, "Do you mind if I walk with you?" He said, "We never had anything like this when I came home from World War II." So those kinds of experiences are very cleansing, and they have an emotional impact on your life forever. And I can only thank the people that put that program together for giving me then the freedom to begin to talk about the things that we could talk about. And I would have never, ever, ever discussed those things until that day. And so when you see things planned for soldiers that are coming home, I have now been at the Gary Airport when a unit came home from Afghanistan. I saw those families gather together in a very private time. There was 93 soldiers coming home and probably 175 family members greeting them. The same emotion came out because I could feel them feeling that relief at that moment. But it was a group. And when you're in harm's way for an extended period of time and you lose some friends and you come home, you really appreciate the freedom we have here. What I learned is the value of the word veteran has a very special meaning. And to be a veteran needs to be passed on generation to generation. So those young men that are serving today need to understand the obligation they have as a veteran to keep that spirit alive and share it with the next generation of young soldiers as they come out and become veterans. It's an intangible, but it's an obligation that we have as veterans to share the meaning of that word and the pride that wells up inside of us for our country. And if we don't carry that spark and that fervor and share it, shame on us, because there's nobody else that's going to do that.
I'm senior ride captain for the Indiana Patriot Guard. That job, and I've had a lot of jobs in my life that paid really good. It's a volunteer outfit, but I've never got paid this well. You know, I'm talking about here. There's nothing like it. Absolutely nothing like it. I love what I do. One of the things you won't see here is a good conduct medal. They tell me I had a problem with authority, and admittedly, I did. There were some people that were my commanders were not too swift, in my opinion. However, I asked my company commander, and I didn't think he'd let me go, but he said, "You want to go over there?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to volunteer to go over with the 57th. He said, "Well, I just happen to have the paperwork. If you want to," I'm thinking, why does he want to get rid of it? And it dawned on me, I'm probably more trouble than I'm worth to him. So, signed all the papers, everything went fine. 62, May 17th, I went to Vietnam. My job, of course, was medic, board chopper. We were the very first air medevac unit sent over. And I did get in a little trouble. I disobeyed, because we were actually under the jurisdiction of the Vietnamese, and I disobeyed this major's thing. It's a long story, but end result was I had a Marine colonel come in, wanted to pin a medal on me for not leaving his boys behind and throwing the 2 Vietnamese guys I was working with off of the chopper and loaded them up because we had too much. We couldn't take off with all that weight, and I got in trouble because I threw 2 of his guys off. They're home. My Marines weren't, so. To make a long story short, that got me out of Vietnam 3 months early. I don't regret anything that I did over there. I have a pretty good record. Anybody that we got aboard our chopper, Bill Anderson was one hell of a chopper pilot. But he scared me a couple of times, one real bad, but if we got a guy aboard our medevac and he was living, he was delivered that way. We never lost a guy. The implications of some of the things that you get involved with, it kind of plays on your mind with some of the decisions that you have to make, and that I don't want to get into too much. I mean, it's happened to everybody over there. You know, it's not the greatest position to be put in, but I don't think there's anything in the world I would trade for what I learned and how quick I grew up. You know, freedom, it's become a real high priority with me. Like I said, when I think of freedom, I think of all our graveyards. It's a sad thing, but that's where you get your freedom from. These guys that are willing to stand up and do that stuff. God bless them.
I actually got my draft notice, but I did enlist for 2 years. Mainly at the time, that was about the best thing to do. A few of my friends that were drafted and waited to go didn't get the service that they wanted. And I figured it was easier to just go ahead and go into the Army, and I'm glad I did. Otherwise, I probably would have been in the Marine Corps. I was with the 18th Brigade, 35th Group, 19th Combat Engineers in Vietnam. Our main goal over there was to assist and build whatever. My first 5 months, we built a base camp for Special Forces by the Cambodian border. After that, we went around to various places to do whatever needed to be done. My dad was a medic in World War II, and he was always patriotic, and he brought us up that way. My older brother was in the Marine Corps. I was in the Army. So no, it was the same as after I came out to this day, that, you know, you should respect the flag, and really you shouldn't bitch about anything unless you have served the country, because you have no idea why people do serve. I don't want them treated like we were when we came home. The way they get treated now is the way that every veteran should get treated that has went to serve. And the way they're treated now is great. And a lot of us older veterans reach out to the younger veterans, especially when they're going to the VA and you could tell that they're lost, basically. So we try to push them in the right direction, because the VA is like any place else. They're not going to tell you anything. You have to ask. So we try to help them.
I went to Vietnam as a vehicle mechanic, and was there a couple months, and was on a job one night, myself and another guy, and we were taking hoses off of a 5-ton truck, and we were down on the bottom of the 5-ton truck working. And we kept hearing tings all the time we were working. And we was looking at each other like, what the heck? So we got done, pulled the hood down on the truck, and there was bullet holes all in the hood of the truck. Well, that made me think a little bit. And I told him, I says, I don't know about you, but tomorrow morning I'm going to the First Sergeant's office in 1049 and go across the compound and become a door gunner on a helicopter. You know, just something out of the blue. And I did that, went in 1049, got the okay, went across the compound, became a door gunner. And most people that you talk to tell you that you were a real stupid person. But I wouldn't change it for the world. I met some of the greatest people, and we did what we had to do and helped a lot of guys in the process. and had my dangerous times, but wouldn't trade it for the world. I tell everybody that, my church gave me a ribbon when I left. And the pastor told me, he says, I want you to bring this back to me. So I did. And I still think that ribbon had a lot to do with me coming home, because some of the things that happened around the guys that I flew with over there, something that you don't write home about. But, you come home and, crazy things that people tell you that happened to them and stuff. I was walking down the middle of my street back home in the neighborhood, and a block away a car backfired. And I was picking myself up out of the weeds, because that's where I went, right to the weeds, and laid there for a few minutes looking around and then thinking how stupid that was. Where I'm at, why would anybody be shooting at you here? When you come home, I don't care if you don't get shot, you don't get scratched or nothing. You come home different.
I enlisted. It took a while before my brothers and sisters knew about it, but I enlisted. I went down there and changed it, and then, boy, that was fast. In 2 weeks, they called me. And I have no regrets, because I felt I did my part for my country, and I'm glad I did. Because as a medic, I was an operating engineer. I was an apprenticeship before I left for the service. I was only working at U.S. Steel for 1 year, and I got drafted. And then they fill out that form, say, what do you want to be in the service? And that, forget that, they made me a medic. And I became a medic, and I liked it. The only thing about it is to go in a combat situation, what they taught us at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, was really, really, teach you about some medication, wrappings, give an injection and that. It doesn't even touch the core of what you're going to see in combat situations. So my first mission, when I was there, I seen what it consisted of. And I see all my fellow brothers looking at me like, could he handle it? Could he do it? And the emotion was in there. It's like I wanted to cry, especially when you lost somebody, and you can't do that because they're looking for you to be strong. So I had to figure something out. So when I was in the rear, and we were in the rear average of 2 to 3 days, and then I talked to the captain. I says, could I work the aid station? He says, you're only in for 3 days. Why do you want to work the aid station? The guys go to the bar and steakhouse. I want to learn more. I says, I feel inadequate out there. If one of my boys get hurt, I want to be able to take care of him and do it the right way. He says, okay. So I worked the aid stations all the time I was in the rear, and I learned a lot. So I was out there when I was in the field and guys got hurt, I was able to save them and stabilize them till they got them to the aid station. And I felt great that I could do that. But when you lose somebody, it stays in your gut, and that'll never go away. It's always feel like you blame yourself you couldn't save them. We're talking reality here. A friend that you might know I've met guys that they get off a helicopter with us, and we just get resupplied. They bring new guys in, and they're dead within 2 hours. And I'm sending them back out. And that's a big factor in my life that I could never get over. And cry, yeah. I'm 65, I'm going to be 66. I cry because that pain's there. It's never going to go away.
When I arrived in Vietnam on December 8th of 1968, they put me in, they didn't put me, put it this way. When we landed, they were short on men in both the Americal Division and the 1st Cav. And so every other man went to a different group. You know, the first person went to the 1st Cav and I went to the Americal. And they shipped me out. And then we landed on an LZ. Well, I had no idea what the Americal Division was about. When we landed on an LZ, it turns out that the 1st Americal Division is a 155 artillery. Well, I'd never seen an artillery piece before in my life until I landed. I had no knowledge whatsoever of what to expect or what was expected of me. And that was scary. I mean, you put me out in the field and during the middle of the war, and I have no idea what my job is or what my responsibilities are, you know, to save myself, to survive. That was the scary part. But after a while, after a couple of weeks, you learn to adapt, and I learned everything there was to know about the 155 howitzer. I became from a powder man, I worked my way up to being the gunner. And as time went on, my hearing got worse because of the rockets, mortars, and the artillery. After 10 months, they decided to send me back into Chu Lai for a hearing test. They put me in a box, and they told me, Joe, raise your hand every time you hear a sound, the tone. I said, okay, doctor. They put me in and closed the door. Started raising my hand nonstop. And the doctor said, Joe, we haven't started the test yet. So at that point, they pulled me out of the box, sat me on a table, and then he said, Joe, we're going to give you a profile. I said, thank you. I said, how soon can I go back to my men? Because by becoming a gunner, I also was leader of the crew, my own unit. And he says, Joe, you're not going back out. I became a member of the Disabled American Veterans, and I was past commander for 3 years, 2007 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10. And I really appreciated everything that the DAV did for me. I also became involved with the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Post 802. I'm the commander right now at the present time. The more I helped veterans, the better I felt. I found out through experience that a lot of veterans who returned from the service had no knowledge of what benefits they were entitled to, and that upset me. Just like every other veteran who returns from the war, they have no idea what questions to ask, who to talk to, who can give them the information that they need. They're more or less, they turn in their weapons and they're put out on the street. As time goes on, they find out after about 20 or 30 years they may have a condition that's service-connected. And they go to the hospital and ask for assistance, and they go to veterans groups. That's where we provide information. And that's what I do. That's what I try to do. It's a motivating factor in my life. After joining the DAV and the VFW, I also joined the American Legion, and next year I'll be a commander of that.
The day after Labor Day in 1969, I joined the Army. And with no guarantees for positions or anything, so I took my basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, in the red mud in the rain up there, and then I took my infantry AIT training at Fort Ord, California, and subsequently was shipped overseas, where I was in Vietnam and Long Binh, and assigned to the 9th Infantry Division. And fortunately for me, as I was waiting transportation to go from Long Binh down to Bearcat, the 9th Infantry Division was the 1st Infantry Division told that they're going home. So guess what? I sat around Long Binh for 2 weeks and got assigned finally as MAC-V, which was Military Assistance Vietnam Command. And MAC-V was all throughout the country of South Vietnam, and I was supposed to be going up north as a security guard. And as I'm processing through, this major said, well, how come you were in the National Honor Society and you ended up in the infantry? I said, well, guess what? I've been asking you guys that for 3 months now. And he said, can you type? I said, yeah, pretty good. And I couldn't type worth a lick. So he made me a company clerk at MAC-V headquarters in Saigon, and once they realized they got me and I couldn't type, they said, no, you're going to be a key punch operator.
saw no major combat. Got knocked out of bed a few times with rockets landing. Had some excitement a few times driving around Saigon. But the worst thing I experienced over there in Vietnam is I brought back the contact with Agent Orange. Agent Orange, at the time, we did not know about it as young 19-year-olds back then who served in Vietnam, but it was a defoliant. It would take the green jungle grasses and weeds and everything else and kill it. So that in my case, I was at Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Saigon, which at that time was the world's largest airport, even busier than Chicago, and it went ahead and we burnt this classified material in a big incinerator that was out at the end of the runway. And it was always brown. I mean, it wasn't green grass, it was burnt grass, it looked like, as if there was a fire all the time. Then we sat around and drank our pop, and the guys smoked their cigarettes, and we spent 2 or 3 hours burning a deuce and a half worth of classified information. And finally, there was one afternoon where we're playing pinochle with one of our good warrant officers that we had, and one of the guys says, "Hey, how come the ground is always brown where we sit?" Well, that's because they spray that orange, Agent Orange junk. And, well, okay, so what is it? Well, that kills the grass. Well, I'm one of the very many Vietnam veterans that has had open heart surgery and related heart trouble because of that. I've had prostate biopsies because of enlarged prostate. I have neuropathy in my feet because of the diabetes, which all is attributed to Agent Orange. So, yes, we all got screwed because of that.
I'm a member of the American Legion in Lowell, Indiana, and the VFW. And the reason I got involved with them is me being of Japanese ancestry. And after World War II, we got incarcerated. The Japanese American people, or the Japanese nationality people. My parents are from Japan, so is my wife's folks from Japan. The lower part of Canada on the west coast, Washington, state of Washington, Oregon, and California, everybody in those 3 or 4 states, when World War II broke out, we got incarcerated into internment camps. There were 10 of those camps in the United States, and each one had about 10, 15 people. Not really a prisoner, but sort of something like that. Then they put us on an army truck and they drove us to a hastily built, looked like army barracks in outside of Phoenix at a Gila River Indian reservation. That's where we stayed for 2 years. My parents were there for 3 years. Salty part of all this was they put all of us that, we had nothing to do with the war. We were all, my 2 older sisters' husbands, one of them volunteered, or both of them might have volunteered, but some of the people that didn't volunteer, the Japanese American fellows, when they turned 18, they got drafted, see? So, you're an American citizen, you have your family, no one has done any sabotage or anything, but then they draft you because you're a citizen. But they took it okay. When everybody started to move out because the army said, government said you could move anywhere in the United States. I think maybe, I don't know if the West Coast was part of it or not. They gave everybody a train ticket and $50. And I graduated high school in 1946. And as soon as I turned 18, I got a draft notice, see? But I was going to graduate high school in June of that same year. So I went to the draft board and I said, I'm going to graduate high school in a couple months. If you'll defer me till then, I will go to the service as soon as I get my diploma. So they deferred me. In the meantime, between my birthday and June, they quit drafting because the war was over, see. And in 1950, when the Korean War broke out, I got drafted. And I said, my name must have been on top of the list because, they deferred me. And so they sent me to Camp Breckenridge, that other side of Evansville, across the river in Kentucky, for basic training. And that's where I met a good friend of mine. He became a good friend of mine. He lived in Lowell, Indiana. And so we became good friends. And then after basic training, we got sent overseas. We separated. I had no contact with him after we got sent overseas. And then we got mustered out in 1952. I came back to Cleveland, and he came back to Lowell. He got married, and I was already married before we got married, my wife and I, before I got sent overseas, you know.
It was the greatest experience of my life. I was fresh out of high school, and I was very, very proud to have been in the Army. Actually, I thought I'd be in the Navy, but there were 17-year-old enlistees who had preference over me, so they filled the quota. So they put me in the Army. 1944-45, I was not in the Battle of the Bulge. I was in the tail end of the war, but believe me, I saw the horrors of war, because every moment of the day or night, we were in harm's way. I did see some compassion also. Once when we took a village, I walked into the house, and it was a big living room, and there by the window sat our medic treating a German soldier who was wounded in the arm. I was really stunned with compassion. Hey, that guy's our enemy. Yet we treated him. Saarbrücken, Saarbasin, that's the area between France and Germany. And when we got to, I think it was the Remagen Bridge, the bridge was blown, and we had to cross a river, and we were told either you climb over the girders of the wreckage of the bridge or go by a two-man life raft. A number of fellas, they froze. They were afraid. Well, I chose to go across in a rubber life raft. We strung a rope from shore to shore, and hand over hand, we got to the other side. And I remember we were now in a single file. It was dark, but there was still enough illumination. And in single file, we walked right past General Patton, about 10 feet away. And there were two generals flanking him, General Kincaid and General Smith. He was our division commander. A great highlight of my life was April 29, 1945. I was in a force that liberated 110,000 prisoners of war, and 30,000 were GIs. And I see it in my mind right now that the GIs would run over to our vehicles and beg for food, because all we had were K rations and C rations, but those in the concentration camps, well, whatever they ate. So it was very, very touching. I'll put it very simply, war is hell wherever fought.